Nostalgia. I've been in a nostalgic mood lately, and I've wanted to play a game from my childhood. Rayman 3, one of my favourite games. I think I'll play this again for the 220th time. Wait a minute. Havoc? Oh no. Oh, good. It's empty. Wait, it's empty.
Yo, the trigger from Bionicle.
Looks like Avak has poor dental hygiene. I guess he prioritizes his creations over his personal well-being. So let's give those gnashes a good old rub. I like to use Colgate for my robot teeth. 5 out of 6 Paraka would recommend. That's it. How do you think their teeth glow in the dark? Sparkling and new. Perfect for dirtying up later.
Yeah, boy.
On to the adjustments. Right, I might upset a few people here. I'd like to take some inspiration from Naparu Mari and have the axle connector on its side. I think the slight loss in height is worth the sleekness of the change. And as an added bonus, it makes him more stable and less likely to, well... It's also seen this way in his intro trailer, which I hadn't noticed before and thought it was quite interesting. For the Zama launcher, I'm going to have this held from the top, to simulate like it is in the Bionicle Heroes game. The orientation of his seismic pickaxe is really inconsistent. In the promotional material, he's holding it like this. In the Bionicle Heroes game, he holds it like this. Oh, and this. But it also gets a completely different colour scheme. And I think someone at TT Games didn't get the memo for the semi-automatic pistol. I've also seen him hold it this way in the comics, but an adjustment needs to be made to accommodate it. I'm aware that a big feature of the Paraka is a dual-action rifle-to-melee option, but with what I will call the Hand-Draxen method, this isn't possible. But you can just remove it and turn it around fairly easily. You know my opinion on Bionicle hands, and the Paraka decided they'd like to be difficult and have this right-hand axle connector on its side. This means I can use the Hand-Draxen method on the left hand, but not the right. Now, I'm not an MOC creator, I'll never claim to be, but I wanted to give a crack at making this work. After a few attempts, some better than others, I've decided to go with this design. Using Huki's neck, and a few other pieces to assist with stability, I've managed to create something that provides the effect I was looking for. Without, making it look like... Well, forget that and look at the pretty light up eyes. Time to get out Boximus Prime for prime time. Deciding how to paint Avak was difficult. I know that he's mainly brown. Relating that to metals, I had the choice of making him either bronze or rusted, and, like his teeth, staying with the neglecting theme, I decided to go for a rusted look. There isn't a better feeling than painting things the colour they were originally, so I painted his brown parts brown again. His legs, arms, spine, chest plate. I then added the additional details, and you note that there actually is a better feeling than that. Nothing beats remembering that Avak's chest is not brown and is in fact grey, so you have to repaint everything you just painted. So I repainted the chest piece and did the details again. Anyway, I finished off the painting, except not fully because I encountered yet another problem. The primer for Avak's head and spine was unable to adhere properly and has resulted in the paint peeling. I assume that this is because the texture is more like that of rubber than plastic, so I got to work on repairing that. In the meantime, I started working on the base. Oh boy, strap yourselves in for this one. I wanted to have the base reference his boss fight in Bionicle Heroes, and seeing these hexagonal floor panels with the giant cogs underneath, it was an easy decision. I marked the shape into the foam and cut it out. I also marked in the floor tiles with a pencil to create the cracks and grooves. I decided to try a new technique of mixing black paint with Mod Podge for a base coat, but it didn't really go to plan, so I scraped off all I could and primed it like I usually do. I used a sponge and various browns and greys to create a stony effect on the tiles, and used a fine brush to fill in the smaller cracks. I then started working on the centerpiece, the glass panel. Using thin sheets of foam, a material I'm sure is perfectly fine to use and will not cause any sort of frustration later on, I created a makeshift prism for the base to keep the resin in place while it cures. I added a tiny amount of ochre paint to the resin to give a tinged orange haze through the glass. And to absolutely nobody's surprise but my own, the foam has completely bonded to the resin. A big mistake on my part, but wondered if I could still salvage the situation. I tried peeling and cutting away the stubborn foam until a thin layer remained. So using isopropyl alcohol, sandpaper, and 18 buckets of sweat, I finally managed to make it look no better whatsoever. I made the very painful decision and started again. If anyone wants a slightly orange hexagonal block of resin that looks terrible, please let me know. I managed to save the original base, which only required a few touch-up repairs. I decided to learn from my mistake and create the Resin Prism Mark II, which housed 4 clamps and a plastic film underneath, which in theory would make it too tight for resin to escape, and easier to remove from the resin. I also decided not to include the orange tint. After waiting for the resin to cure again, and as you can tell from my reaction,
Oh no!
everything went perfectly. One thing I hadn't accounted for was that flimsy plastic sheets are flimsy, and with the base being propped up by the clamps, the weight of the resin had pulled the film downward, leaking onto the sides of the base, and having a bumpy sticky texture underneath. At my wit's end with the base, I returned to Avak. I firstly assembled him and put him in the pose he would be in, making sure to absolutely not put his limbs on the wrong way round. After putting the limbs the right way around and feeding the lighting cables through him, I finished off the details. Giving the mask and spine a brush-on primer worked a treat and didn't flake the paint. I decided to use a brown shoe polish for the dark wash, just because I wanted to enhance the rust details and get into the small places I couldn't reach. After taking a break from the base, off camera, I sanded down the sides and repainted the stony texture. I also decided to add holes for the cables and dig away at the panel to fix the unsightly mess with a small layer of resin.
This penguin's had too much time on his hands.
It is not perfect by any means, but at this point I will happily take mediocrity for my sanity. I substituted the ochre tinted glass in favour of an ochre painted foam piece. Through the resin panel, this should give an impression of the hazed fog underneath. I then created the cog out of foam and painted it a similar stony texture to the base. I couldn't replicate the scale, and I wanted to try out using a motor to have the mechanism moving, but with the resin disaster I decided to cut my losses. Hey everyone, Editing Matt here. Why is Avak's music in Bionicle Heroes going this hard? I've had it in the background of this video and it's just awesome. I wanted a flame flickering light effect under the base. I found a flameless candle light, but just needing the diode, I installed it in a not visible position, but also providing decent coverage. Once everything was in place, I sealed the bottom of the base. Avak was glued into position and I soldered all the cables together. A few final paint touch-ups and I think Avak wants to see the beauty shots. A big thanks for all the support recently. It's been incredible to see and I love reading your suggestions. This was a bit of a headache to make, but I'm glad it worked out in the end. I hope you like it too. See you soon.